To me, I think personally, I think to have lived in different places in this country and traveled and been fortunate and privileged to travel around the world a little bit, I know that I want my state, my home, to be a place that I'm proud of. I want it to be a place where I can raise my family, where they know that they're not better than or worse than anybody else. And when we have legislation like this come down the pike and just accepted, it really turns all of that on its head and makes me quite infuriated. So I believe we have to make use of our organization to flip this thing back the way it's supposed to be.
Awesome. Liza, do you,
Yeah,
whoever
sure.
wants to go next?
What?
Whoever wants to go next.
Yeah, I'll go next. I just don't quite know how to voice how important, as a matter of fact, I started feeling emotional. I've kind of, just for myself, been working on racism and my position of white privilege for pretty much my entire life. And it is still, I mean, that's why I get emotional. It's still so much bigger and has so much greater consequence than I could have ever thought. And I mean, so then what happens if we say we can't even talk about it? So anyway, before I start crying, I'll stop here.
Right. How about you, Reverend Thompson?
Yeah, it's just simply based on experience. Growing up in the segregated South, segregated schools, segregated church. And so often, even though I was at a segregated school, it wasn't even taught. It was against policy then to teach certain things. And many of you might remember when last year, I believe it was, when I gave that Mayflower experience, when I learned that we didn't come over on the Mayflower. From our family, from one of my closest brothers. So I think this is extremely important to teach it for healing in America. If it's not taught, there will always be a lot of animosity. A lot of people don't know. So I see it's critical to be able to teach it, the good and the bad, and the ugly, as they said. So that's the reason why I'm so important on hoping we can reverse this, and just not in our state, but this is one of the other events is nationwide, which is again going to further divide this country. So that's in a nutshell the way I feel about it.
Well, I'll go. Like Reverend Thompson, I remember being in kindergarten, and I remember when the teacher was talking about slavery, and she didn't mention anything about the African aspects of slavery. And I came home and I told my mom about it, and she was like, well, those were Black people. And it was just, I kind of denied it. I was like, well, why would she omit that important information? And I think, just telling history accurately without omissions, without glossing over things, without making things seem as if they were altruistic, or that there was just revisionist history where there is this portrayal of things weren't as bad as they really were. I think that really does a disservice to children. I think that children can't be critical thinkers. I think we are risking history repeating itself. So that's why it's important to me.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I'll jump in. In a very fundamental way, I trace it back to values formed as a child, and I'll cite the Superman program, the values of truth, justice, and the American way, in the ideal sense about the American way, not the way America really is. but also picking up on the momentum that we have now, mainly derived from the uh, absolute uh, disgusting murder of George Floyd, and the anti-racism movement that that has inspired. I think we need to keep up that momentum.
I'll throw in one. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, which is about 55% Black. But when I was growing up, I didn't know anybody Black. We were that segregated.
Right.
And I remember getting into high school, and I had 1,500 kids in my high school. About 5 were Black. And there was always this tension, this distance kind of thing, but nobody ever taught why. And nobody ever help people understand. I was just a dumb white kid, you know? And so I really remember resenting that, being puzzled and being angry that people didn't teach that. Then when my wife and I were raising our kids, we wanted to make sure that they had experience of the real world, you know? So we made sure to live in an integrated neighborhood. We attended a church where Black and white folks were valued. And that's just been so important to feel like I can understand more about why things were the way they were when I was 15, 18, something like that.
I'll jump in. The fact that the state legislature has spent its time trying to eradicate history at a time when so much inequality has been made really stark by the pandemic is completely disgusting. And I think also as a teacher, the thought that our state leaders think that we can be forced to oppress our students makes me deeply angry. And I think the other thing is that, if we cannot model to students how to have productive conversations about difficult things, where are they going to learn that, right? How are we ever going to get anywhere if we can't acknowledge the pain, if we can't acknowledge where we've been, and if we can't model for that? It's that fragility, it's that fear that I see coming from our state leaders, and that they want to, do some smoke and mirrors and point the finger at something so that they don't have to deal with anything uncomfortable. It's pathetic. So whatever we can do to fight back, many is in.
Well,
Thank you.
like Ed, I grew up in the segregated South as well, but segregated Memphis right down the road. But even then, I was never told what I could not think, or what tools I could not use to understand, mental tools. And that's exactly what this is. It's an attack on the tools you use to understand what's happening in your world. The tools are being demonized so that you can't even access the tools you use to help figure out and understand what's going on. And that's what makes it demonic.
I agree. I want to say that I think that if we don't teach children about this from a historical standpoint in schools, then what will happen is that the kids will learn from the dinner table at home how to think about people of other races, particularly African Americans. That they'll learn whatever they're being taught, racist views from their home about African Americans. And unfortunately, there will not be anything taught in the schools to counter that, to add any context to what they're seeing and what they're observing. And so they'll just be, things are going to get much worse. And secondly, if the reason for not teaching it is because it's too traumatic, well, then I ask the question, are we leaving other things out that were also traumatic, like the Holocaust? Are we taking that out of the curriculum? Are we taking out the bombing of Pearl Harbor? Are we taking anything else out of the curriculum that may be deemed traumatic, or are we just taking that? And if that's the only thing they're removing from the curriculum, then the question is why that and nothing else?
Good point.
And I'll just jump in. People said a lot of things that resonated with me on all sorts of levels. So I'm just going to add one other new thing. And actually, it's a little bit key to, they're actually not changing the curriculum, and there are state standards. And actually, we had school board member Abigail Tyler with us, and Brian asked her about it. She pointed out, like, the state standards, which we have to test, we have to teach for funding, require we talk about Rosa Parks, MLK, talk about a variety of things, because these aren't about the standards. And how do we teach those things with this? And then it has this word about impartial instruction is okay. It says that very explicitly in the bill, but the absurdity to claim that history is impartial is, it's just absurd. And then for all these reasons of, why are you spending your time telling passing these standards to make some, and then I think about this, I think about the students who you're now telling them they're not supposed to talk about their experiences. I just remember a student being like, racism is never going away. Like, that's just reality. And like that we can't, a student, my classroom now, we can't have a conversation now. I don't know. It's just scaring teachers, which I think is, it's a scare tactic.